moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Larry and a second by Debbie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Have your lips, Magdalene.
Aye.
Watched. All you. Motion carries. Moving on. Six public comments. Second by Debbie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, can you guys hear me? Good.
Yes.
Okay, way lag. 1.6, we have public comments. Are there any public comments? There's 2 pages here. All right, folks, we're moving on. 1.7, approval of our meeting minutes from July 20th, I believe they were. Yeah, July 20th.
Motion to approve.
I'll second, but there's a tiny typo under public comments. The city's largest employer, it should say, it says largest employee.
We have a motion to approve by Debbie, a second by Glenn with the tiny correction there, Linda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. 2.1, I don't believe it's an action item, but we do have the Johnson O'Malley Parent Committee meeting minutes there from February 5th, March 11th, and May. Are there any questions or discussion?
Where do you see that?
I have it under 2.1. Do you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
Maybe
No.
just try refreshing your board docs, Nick, or
Oh, okay. All right. Because I have to, okay, got it.
3.1, are there any future agenda items?
I do
would
have a
make-
couple.
Go ahead.
Okay. One is a discussion of staff compensation for summer reentry work. I think you tried to get it on the agenda before, but I think just with everything going on, it maybe didn't make it on. And then, am I supposed to provide like an explanation or just say what I want? Like, just the agenda item?
I think you're fine.
Okay. Another one, which is really time sensitive, so I don't know if we can have another meeting like this week or early next week, but it would be a possible adjustment to dual credit options for high school students. And then I have the third one, and I just have the 3 would be in the last meeting, we talked about a later start date, discussing a later start date for students. And I don't see that on the agenda for tonight. So I'm just wondering if that's still something that's a discussion or not.
I think we could discuss the later start date at the plan, but the other 2 items will have to be added to future agendas.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to be sure, Jeff, that the school board tribal council joint meeting gets rescheduled.
Yeah, I spoke with them today, and Laura Gordon, the tribal secretary, is getting back to me. It's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday. They're working out the details. They have a council meeting Wednesday morning, so she's going to meet with administration and get back to us. I do have a question for Magdalene though. On the summer compensation, we're given an update tonight on the budget in terms of what was spent for the two separate budget proposals, one with the committee work and two with the instructional curriculum work. Did you want that broken down? Is there something that, because Randy's going to report that tonight.
Yeah, I forwarded you and Nicole and Beth an email on August 5th that I had from Randy that had some questions and concerns related to staff compensation for summer reentry work. One of my concerns is that we're compensating staff who are being asked to give presentations out or like do work outside of committee meetings. So I just want to make sure that we are addressing that.
Her details pretty,
And I did reply to that. Meglin, I did reply to you on that one. It said, yes, he was being, the gentleman that you spoke about was being compensated.
I'd have to look back in my emails, Jeff, but I don't remember a reply from you. And there were a few things that were an issue in that email. But.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
3.2, the finance committee.
We met last week and recommended the vouchers. Got to look at the planning budget update, the reentry plan. The bus contract, the purchase of a halo fogger system, we recommended. We also, and I'd say this is just a preliminary heads up because Jeff and Randy are still getting information, but we did feel that there was justification and funding for some new positions, including one to assist Chris in the IT area. But we're more on that later. And we did have a discussion, which is I see on the agenda, about potential change in policy regarding COVID related purchases, but that's on the agenda for later.
Thanks, Glenn. 3.3, did the policy committee meet?
Colleen, we didn't meet yet. We're gonna plan on meeting this week sometime. I believe Jeff said as soon as the meeting's over here, we'll be talking about those two items, bringing those back and for discussion.
All right, moving on to administrative report. 4.1 through 4.5, we have the administrator, IT, middle school, high school principal, buildings and grounds, and the rec center.
Motion to approve reports 4.1 through 4.5. Second.
We have a motion by Debbie, a second by Cindy. Is there any more discussion?
In the middle school, high school report, she mentions giving survey results. Is that going to be later during the reentry plan conversation?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That was all.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. 5.1, we have vouchers.
I move that we approve the vouchers in the amount of $635,754.94.
Second.
We have a motion by Glenn. a second by Lori. Could we have a roll call, please, Linda? You're on mute, Linda.
Glenn Carlson,
Aye.
Nicole Boyd,
Yes.
Cindy Garrity,
Yes.
Larry Derrigan,
Yes.
Esme Martinson,
Yes.
Magdalene Dale,
Yes.
Debbie Knopf,
Yes.
and Cindy Garrity.
Yes again.
Oh, sorry.
Still yes.
Motion carries, everybody. Moving on to 6.1, consider school reentry planning budget update.
This is
Randy?
just Randy's report on what amounts have been spent so far out of the grant fund. And Randy, I don't know if you wanted to say anything more than that.
Sure. Like Glenn had mentioned earlier too, there are some positions that we are considering that we have to delve into a little bit more, and amongst them are help for Chris Plansky. I believe there was also an assistant nurse, if that's correct.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
then, okay, and then also some bus monitors. So those we have to kind of like get more information on before we can move forward with budget planning. But out of the 41,000 that we had budgeted for re-entry work this summer, we've spent 7,324. That's only been 2 payrolls. We have another payroll this Friday, so there'll be more money coming out of there. But it's been about $3,000 a payroll, give or take a little bit of money. So I think we're still well within the $41,000 range that we were thinking that what might happen. And then also we spent $18,000 in supplies, a lot of face masks and shields and things like that, thermometers, items from Jackie, items from Dave Weber. And then we'll also have the $33,000 approximately if we are approved on the Halo system. Is there anything I missed, Jeff?
No, that sounds right, Randy.
Yeah, the big question on the staffing was more on the nurses, the part-time nurse and the bus monitors, which I think we acknowledged were really somewhat contingent on school reopening. To having students in the building. The IT position, I think it's just a matter of trying to work with Chris and figure out what the compensation parameters for that ought to be. But that's presumed to be a right away position and not temporary.
Correct. We thought it would be more of a permanent full-time position where the nursing and the other positions would be more once school started and we had more of a parameter of what we're looking for.
Thanks, Randy.
Um, 6.2 on our agenda, consider 2020-2021 school reentry school plan. And if everyone could refrain from their comments and questions until the administration presents the plan, that would be helpful.
Are you able to see the plan?
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
Yes.
great.
All right. So from last Wednesday till tonight, we've now provided the school board, BESPAP, and the committees have been working hard the last week, putting their end responses, things that they've settled on, into draft form. Beth was able to work with the committees and administration in putting together this draft response plan. This plan, for those of you who are new tonight, is the second phase of the Bayfield School District's COVID-19 school reopening plan. The plan tonight that we're going to talk about illustrates the operations perspective of opening the school. A lot of the what if questions that community members or parents or teachers and board members might have. July 20th was the first phase where we have our framework. Tonight, we're looking within the framework and how the operations will run. In the audience tonight, we have people who are there for the board members who have questions. We're happy to have Holly Weber here from Bayfield County. Health Services. We're happy to have Sherry Burrow here. I think Sherry's here, I'm not sure, but she was planning on being here from the Rockcliffe Health Clinic. Sherry is on the team. And also Jackie Noah, our school nurse, is here tonight. We have Dave Weber, Terry Nawago from the facilities. Kate Sweeble was invited from transportation, Barb Reback for athletics, Chris Plansky from technology, and Karen Batan from food. The information that we're sharing tonight is a compilation of what we've been doing now since early July. It's really the district's roadmap. It's the roadmap to how we're going to operate within the pandemic timeframe, or pandemic itself, not timeframe. In creating this document, we relied heavily on the experts in science and the experts from the national level, from the CDC, experts from Wisconsin, Department of Health Services, and of course, Bayfield County, Redcliffe, the school district, the school board, et cetera. So this plan is really an adoption of all the efforts from a lot of different people. So the document illustrates a lot of what we talked about previously, in terms of student services. There'll be questions about technology, food service, transportation. We talked about the start of the school day. Those are all up for discussion tonight. But the other larger point for tonight was on the interest of everybody, including community members, particularly, is how are we going to handle the safety measures within the school? How are we going to handle if a person comes down with COVID? How are we going to handle if a student is exhibiting, our staff is exhibiting symptoms of COVID? How are we going to handle that? So pages 5 through 8 in this document, we'll talk a little bit about now, and then we can move around to some of those other questions that we've had regarding the start of the school year, maybe some instructional questions regarding Canvas, those types of things board members can jump in on and talk about. But I thought it was important to start this meeting with the what ifs. And by doing that, we have Holly Weber, Bayfield County, we have Jackie, and we know of our school nurse, health expert for the school, and then we have Sherry Burrow from Redcliffe. So why don't we start from there? Without further ado, if you have any questions, board members, before we start talking about the program, do you have any questions? Or before we begin? And I just have a housekeeping note to talk about. The document that you have, page 5, the flow charts, in page 6, if you notice on the document that you have, it's really small. The red lettering is really small. So what Linda's going to do tonight is enhance it to the best of our ability. But the document you have in your board docs, we're going to clean that up. The red area is really, really hard to read. But tonight, Linda's enhancing it for everybody to see on the screen. Okay. So why don't we start there? And Jackie, if you could join me, or Holly, Sherry, if we started on page 5, we're talking about the what ifs. Page 5 is the COVID-19 signs, symptoms, and exposure. Students or staff with symptoms. Who would like to start with this particular graph and maybe talk a little bit about what the team, the committees talked about?
I can speak if you'd like, since this came from me, basically. So this is meant to be an easily accessible and usable tool for somebody to look at if they have a staff member or a student who all of a sudden becomes ill throughout the day, or say they're ill before school and their parents aren't sure what to do with them, if they should send them or not. So you start off with that first big bubble and you say, is the individual experiencing any of those symptoms? If the answer is yes, they need to stay home or leave the school. and contact their doctor for further instruction. We understand that there are a lot of students and staff members that have conditions where they could be exhibiting some of those symptoms on the regular, like asthmatic kids are going to have a cough. We realize that. And that's why if that cough is new to them, we want them to call their doctor. And if their doctor feels like they need to be tested for COVID, they need to be the ones to make that determination. But if they feel like it's their normal asthmatic cough, and they maybe need a little adjustment in their medication, but they're okay to go back to school, they would make that determination. So once you contact your doctor, there is that box that says, was COVID-19 testing done? Yes, if it's positive, the individual needs to stay home and public health will be contacting them, and we will be the ones that tell them when they can return. There are a whole set of parameters that one has to meet before they can re-enter the community as a whole. If they're negative and they're sick and they're negative, they have to stay home until they're symptom free for 24 hours. If testing was not done, that's when we hit the no and go over to, does another medical diagnosis explain the symptoms? If no, but they, you know, if not, they're like, no, we're not really sure what is wrong, but they're having the symptoms, but they didn't test them, they need to stay home for 10 days. Because that is the contagious period for COVID-19. It's usually 2 days before symptoms start, and then 10 days after is when you're most contagious. And then they have to be symptoms, have to have marked improvement for 24 hours also before we would discontinue a quarantine period. If they do have strep or something else that explains their symptoms, then we would refer them to stay home based on the diagnosis per the Wisconsin Childhood Communicable Disease Chart, or until 24 hours symptom free without medication, if it's not on the chart. Does that make sense? Is it easy enough, do you think, for people to understand? This will also be available on the Bayfield County COVID page for the community as a whole. Any questions?
Yeah, just one on your, there's 12 symptoms here. Do you have to have a combination or just one of 12?
Just one.
Okay.
I've had patients who have basically had the sniffles, or they thought it was their allergies and they just have a little bit of a stuffy nose and they're positive for COVID. That's what makes it really hard to pinpoint who's got it and who doesn't. And some people don't have symptoms at all, and they're what we call an asymptomatic carrier, which, then they're just walking around spreading it, which is why it's really important for people to wear a mask and wash their hands.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Holly, this is Glenn Carlson. Do you think that your department has the resources to be able to do the contact tracing and testing that really we're dependent on? For
reopening the school?
Well, yes.
Or just in general?
I guess both.
Well, I will say that my department has been working nonstop since March. Even after I'm done with this meeting, I'm going to have to call somebody because their test results came in after 5. We do have contact tracers waiting in the wings to help if the 2 nurses that are currently doing this get too overwhelmed. I think that if all of a sudden we have an outbreak at a school or we have an outbreak somewhere else and we get overwhelmed, that is something that Jeff and I have talked about before when we talk about, what kind of threshold needs to be met for like school closure or something like that. I think when we get a case in the school, and it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when, you know, we have to just be prepared as best as we can. And, you know, we have probably about 3 or 4 other contact tracers on standby should we need it for a big outbreak like that.
Holly, I guess that brings up a question. Are staff members at the school eligible or qualified to be contact tracers?
At the school?
Staff of the school, right?
No. No, you have to take special training to be a contact tracer. And all the contact tracing for a case in the school and all notifications to students and parents should be done by the health department, not by the school.
Okay.
Holly, this is Esme Martinson. I'm wondering then, do we have a number that you as the county health department have decided that if there's just one case at a school, we close the school? Is it a percentage?
Yeah, it's a percentage. We did send out a document. I think it's done and was sent to Jeff that has kind of an activities level chart that moves through what kind of activities would be okay based on the parameters of the area at the time. So if you're in the green, you know, it's like green, yellow, orange, and red. Basically, red is everything is shut down. Green is not everything is honky-dory and we're business as usual, but it is the most lax, like as far as things that are allowed in like activities and sports and what the classroom needs to look like. Our thresholds that we have put on that are fairly conservative, not conservative. I would say they're, I mean, they're pretty broad. I think what we did is we pretty much took the same number threshold as regular like RSV or flu. But Jeff and I have talked about it, and you know, if the school feels like they want to make it more strict, we are great with that. We don't take closing a school lightly. It's not something that we want to do. And we have a very good working relationship, Jeff and I feel like. And I think that if we talk together and we decide, you know, I think that we should shut down for a couple of days or a couple of weeks and then try again. I feel like we have a good enough working relationship where we can make those determinations together, because it's not really black and white. There's a lot of gray area there. It's going to depend on the situation. It's going to depend on what kinds of activities the case was doing. It's going to depend on how big their cohort group is. You know, if it's a high schooler and they're, you know, in sports and they're, you know, doing other things and they've exposed a lot of kids, then that's different than if it's a kindergartner who only goes to school 2 days a week. You know what I mean? And their bubble is a lot smaller. But then also we have to keep in mind that it's a K through 12 school and you all share the same air system. So
Holly, this is Jackie. Can I just add to that I don't think that graph is shared in this document. So that might be an important thing to put in there as well.
yeah, I think that Sarah probably sent it off to Jeff because I think we have it done. And I did send it with the rest of the documents that I sent the wellness committee. So somebody should have it.
Correct. The wellness committee definitely has it. Beth has it, but I don't think it's included in the plan. And that might be a really nice and important piece for the board and the community to be able to see.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it kind of flows in with the Bayfield schools level for reentry plan. It kind of just gives a little bit more parameter to it and about, you know, like, for instance, if you're going to have sports, what kind of what does practice look like when you're in the yellow versus the orange? What is, you know, we aren't really recommending inter-school play at any level right now. We're pretty concerned about that at the health department.
Some of that information is in this document. Because I was reading through it this afternoon, and some of what you're saying, I don't know if it's exactly the graph and the chart, but I know that some of that information is still in here if we were to scroll down.
Okay.
This is Magdalene talking. Holly, I have a quick question for you. Just curious if you can, what color would we be right now?
Well, if you would have asked me Friday, I would maybe say between yellow and orange. Today, I'm going to say orange because I had 5 cases come up over the last 3 days. When we were averaging like 1 or 2 a week, now we're averaging like 5, 6 or more a week.
I guess I have a question for like Jackie. Jackie, do we have things in place where I know there's kids out there that's got allergies and stuff like that, and we send these kids home with sniffles and stuff like that. I know parents will get mad if we send them home all the time with sniffles because they're allergies. But when they come back, do they have to have a doctor's note to come back? Or is it if we know their history, we have them sign something? Or I'm just curious if we have something in place for that.
So at this time, that is a work in progress. The ideal would be that, so if a student has a COVID-related symptom that is unexplained by something else, then that is when we're sending them, or we're asking parents to take them in and possibly have them tested, or you know, at least consult with the primary care provider. I'm not positive at this point. Like, can we ask for a doctor's note? That was a question that I put out in one of our meetings. Was can we as a school district require a note from a doctor that says this child has an other explained health condition, you know, for example, asthma, where yes, they will be coughing now and now, or you know, they will have the sniffles because they have an allergy to this. I think that's something that we really need to work on and pinpoint down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then again, it's always hard to determine if it's COVID or not because of sniffles. But I think that's one of the questions, you know, it's like if the child has to, you send them home and they have to return, you know, are we sure it wasn't COVID, or are we sure? So is there, I think at the clinic, and I'm not quite sure on this, maybe someone from Red Cliff could help with that, but they could go there and see their physician and they could make that determination, I guess, like we talked about.
Right. And I think, and what that boils down to is if the physician determines that it's a symptom that is explained by another condition, such as asthma, allergy, then that allows the student to come back. They can be tested, but, you know, I mean, they can be tested on that day and then they could still contract COVID. So it, you know, there's no guarantee there.
I guess it's probably impractical, and I think Holly's probably on mute. I was
Sorry,
just,
I was telling my son to get out of here.
Holly, this is probably impractical, but I'm just going to throw it out. And that is, what about the idea of frequent testing of the student body and the staff?
That is not feasible. We don't have the capacity to do that in staffing or testing. If there was to be an outbreak at the school, where we have so many students with COVID-like symptoms or flu-like symptoms, and perhaps we have 1 or 2 positive cases that we know of, at that point, we would probably request the National Guard to come and do a mass testing at the school.
Thank you.
As far as surveillance testing, we can't really do that. There has been some talk about trying to figure out a way to do population surveillance, which is different. It's not testing an individual, but this probably sounds really strange, but they do testing at like sewage treatment facilities. And they kind of go by like how high the viral load is in that type of situation as to what the actual infection rate of a certain population looks like. It's something that they do with like water treatment for like cholera and things like that. And I kind of use it as like the everybody spit in a bucket analogy. You know, everybody spit in a bucket, and if you're showing kind of an unusual load of the virus in the spit bucket, then you probably have quite a few kids that have it or are asymptomatic carriers. I'm going to say that that's just an idea that we've kind of talked about. We don't have any plans to initiate something like that at this time.
Would there be something that would stop a sanitary district from doing that in conjunction with you if they wanted to?
It would depend on who has time to do it. We would probably have to tap one of our environmental health sanitarians to work on that.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Holly, this is Debbie Knopf. I have another question. I was doing some reading earlier today and came across a recommendation from the World Health Organization that schools should open only if fewer than 5% of those tested for the virus over a 2-week period are positive. And they use the numbers of, you know, like 100,000. Of course, we have a small population here, but do you have any threshold numbers like that for our area that you're using? Or are you, I know you referred to a case by case basis, but countywide, do you have a threshold that would be fall in that percentages that we would need to be on higher alert?
I will say yes and no. I think that if we suddenly had an uptick in cases down in the Drummond area, we would not request Bayfield to close because our county is so large. I mean, it's one of the largest in the state. Even though we don't have a big population, it's kind of spread out. So because not the general public doesn't know where the most cases are, but I know, I know where they are. I would be more apt to say, hey, Jeff, I'm seeing a really big spike in cases in the area, and I've got some suspected people who are in your age group, and it might be a good idea to shut down for a little while. You know, I feel like I can have that conversation with him, but I don't think that we would say, well, the county is in the red. The county is in the red right now because for our capacity and our threshold and our staffing, we've been in the red. So we can't really use that as a parameter necessarily because we're always going to be busy. So, and I think it would depend on where the uptick in cases are as to whether I would say, hey, maybe we should, back off, or, say you were in school 5 days a week, but suddenly we had an uptick in cases. I would be like, maybe you should go back to 2 days a week for now, or move between those levels. I feel pretty confident that I can have that conversation with the school.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to add to that, if we
Can't hear you, Jeff.
I just wanted to say that we met last week, Beth Papp, the administrators, and Sherry Burrow from the Reckless Clinic. And so when there's a tough decision to be made, this group of people will be gathering our intel, so to speak. We'll be collaborating together. And then from that perspective, I will pass the information on to the board prior to any type of 2-day closure, 10-day closure, 14-day closure. That's how we're going to arrive at that decision. A group of people, the experts, bringing it to the board level prior to any messaging going out to the community. The Rec Club tribe, that communication there, really the point. Everybody will be, the leadership will be involved in that decision, a critical decision that is. And it'll start from Holly and myself and the others getting together to start that process.
Yeah, the goal for the county for this school year really is going to be to do our best to keep kids in school for as long as we possibly can, because we know that kids do better when they can learn in school with their teachers who are trained to teach them. And that is our main goal.
I have a question. And I don't know who can answer it or who will have the answer, but if I call the school on Monday at 10 o'clock and I kept my child home because they were ill and I brought them to the clinic and we can get a 15-minute rapid COVID test and my child is positive and I call the school, what is the school's protocol? At 10:30 in the morning.
Call me. That's what their protocol is.
That's not the procedural step that we need to know.
Well, and Nicole, I will say also, this is Jackie, that is in the draft of the flow chart there, that if someone is deemed positive, that's where it goes. It goes to the county, and then the county advises the school. Does that make sense?
No, because I want to know what's going to happen when I'm, as a parent, if in the 6th grade class that my child is in, whether I know or not who the person is, we're going to close the school and put 300 kids back on school buses and ship them all back home, or the kids get picked up. Like, we need to know those things. We need to be able to respond to those.
I think what Nicole is saying, or it sounds like you're saying, Nicole, is as a parent, if you were the parent of a healthy kid, but you found out that there was a sick kid in the classroom, parents need to know what to expect if this situation arises so that they can at least kind of at a moment's notice put their plan in place to get their kid home safe. I might be wrong, but that's what it brought up when Nicole said that.
I think it's regardless of if my kid is the healthy one or the sick one, it's still what is the procedure when that happens.
Right. And I think parents are going to want to know what to expect.
Well, 100% they're going to want to know. If I go around telling every parent, well, the school's going to call the county, they're going to be like, and then what? Well, I don't know, because the county, they'll tell us what to do. Like, it's not It's not like, it doesn't look good for us to not
Do
be
you,
able to answer
do you
them.
want me to walk you through what happens when I get notified of a positive case? Do you think that would help?
No, because that's not the school situation.
At the school level, what is the school gonna do? The classroom teacher, how are they gonna respond? How is the superintendent and principals gonna respond?
Because the last thing we want to do ever again is send out a mass message to every family in our school district and say, we have a 17-year-old female in a high school COVID positive and everybody must isolate. So those are the things we need to know. How, like, maybe you guys are talking about them in the background, but we need to see them written down to know that there is a plan.
So-
Okay, so, Nicole, I guess what I would say to that is that, if there was someone that was, if we knew they were, well, we wouldn't know that they were COVID positive, but if they had symptoms, they would be brought to one of the isolation areas. And then from there, parents would be called and asked to bring that student to see their primary care physician.
No, but I'm calling you, like, tell you already that my child has tested positive. So then who on the school side, like, flips the switch and initiates the plan?
All right, I could take a stab at this. All right, so, okay, a couple things. Number one, we're certainly, we understand that, you know, how it was handled previously, it needs to be handled in a different way. So the school district, within the confines of the operations, we have a couple things. We have a crisis response team, and then we have the COVID response that I just described earlier, which is Holly, Sherry Burrow from the clinic administration, et cetera, Beth Papp, et cetera. So then the question comes down to, and we've talked about this previously in meetings, when that situation happens as Nicole described. So Bayfield Colony or the Rector Clinic would notify the district. It's at that point, the crisis team or the district team is going to wait on either Redcliffe or Holly at the Bayfield Colony to provide information for us. Because it's my understanding, Holly, that the contact tracing would come from the county level. We are somewhat out of that realm. However, there's going to be a panic within the district, within the walls of the school district, because we're a small school. You know, there will be probably a panic within the building from students and staff. So then the question is, how do we route that information out without breaking any confidentiality or any type of barrier that, you know, we don't want to cause harm to. So how I see it from previous meetings in the last couple of weeks is the district is going to be notified that there's a positive. We're going to wait for the county to provide information, or the clinic. My understanding is the Rector Clinic in Bayfield County have an MOU. They're working side by side. And then we will then disseminate information as we get it, without bringing a larger panic to the whole community. Now that's kind of how I'm breaking it down now. Does that sound accurate at this point?
What does Holly say?
Yes, that is right. So there shouldn't be any sort of mass notification from the school. What would happen is I would discuss with Jackie what that student's class schedule looks like, and where their movements are within the school, so that we can determine what families I need to contact individually.
Sorry. There'd be no sort of school-wide announcement.
Not unless the school was going to close.
Thanks.
So what kind of time frame are we talking about here from the time the notification comes that the child is sick and the team gets all the notices and things start to happen? What kind of time frame is that going to take? How
So
long?
for any sort of positive COVID case, contact tracers have 24 hours to make contact with that positive person and determine their movements within the community. From that point on, I have 48 hours to notify the contacts of that person and get their information down and give them instruction on isolation and quarantine. And that is a state statute, I believe.
So they could potentially be spreading it for at least a day while they're in school.
Right, but if they're sick and they're symptomatic and they were tested, they should be home.
Right.
Mhm. That's why it's really important to have that educational piece with parents. Like, I know childcare is kind of an issue when your kids are sick, but especially during this time, if your kids are sick and you don't know why, it's really important that they stay home.
So I still have the concern that I call the school at 10:30 and tell the school that my child is tested COVID positive and they were in school the day before. And the school's just gonna like not lock down certain classrooms, or I mean, Jackie's only one person too. She can't be like tracking every student in the school. And we're just gonna let students go for the day and then ship them all back home on the bus. Or we have one isolation space in the school, so we would, maybe be able to isolate a student or a staff, I don't know. I just feel like there's still a lot of holes that need to be filled in because I'm not feeling like it's laid out enough to feel comfortable saying that we know how to respond when we're notified of a positive.
I guess, Nicole, that brings up a question, kind of foundational question. Should you as the parent be calling the school with that news of the positive, or should you be calling the Bayfield County Health Department? And Holly, what is your suggestion?
I would suggest that they call the health department versus the school so that I can initiate that contact tracing right away. Generally, those test results come to me, but there is occasion where the doctor gets it before I do and notifies the patient before I have a chance to talk to them. That does happen on occasion. So I would say that it is preferable for a parent to call the health department or the Red Cliff Community Health Center and speak with their community health nurse, Sherry, or even Brian Daly about the exposure, because if the student lives in Red Cliff, that would be a Red Cliff jurisdiction and the Red Cliff Community Health Center would do that. And if they live outside of the tribal boundary and they live in Bayfield County, then that would be up to the health department to do that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Will parents have a step-by-step and like how to kind of laid out for their students so that if their student's sick, they know what to do, they know which phone number to call? I feel like this should be on everybody's fridge at home with all of these numbers. I mean,
right. I believe that once these flow sheets are finalized, there is going to be another sheet that has recommendations on what to do if you or your student are traveling and what needs to happen when you get back as far as school goes. It's hard to put all that stuff on one piece of paper. It's just not going to fit. But in that will be included numbers for the Red Cliff Community Health Center, the COVID respiratory hotline for MMC, and the Bayfield County Health Department.
And this is Jackie. Esme, that is, if you look in the plan, that is actually laid out in there. There are those phone numbers of who to contact. If you know, if you have a known exposure, if you have a suspected exposure, and who to call and what to do in those circumstances.
Great, thanks.
Holly, you're on mute.
How about now? Sorry, new computer. So there are separate flow sheets for figuring out what to do if a student actually has symptoms versus if they've had a known exposure. And the one that's up on your screen right now has to do with a known exposure because it's different.
And I think it's important for everyone to view all of those flow sheets too, because Holly, you guys at the county have done a phenomenal job of tracking everything from known exposure, suspected exposure, to possible exposure, and do I have symptoms? What do I do if I do this? And that is all laid out in there.
Say, when a test is administered, how quick do the results come back? Are we dependent on outside labs?
Well, that depends, I guess. The Red Cliff Community Health Center has a rapid testing machine that can have results within hours. However, if a student had a lot of symptoms and they did the rapid test and it came back negative, sometimes they will choose to send out an additional lab to an outside lab to confirm, because there is a margin of error for those rapid testing tests. And if you are getting a test done at MMC or at Chequamegon Clinic or Essentia, those do get sent off. Some of them get sent to the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene down by Madison. Some of them get sent to Mayo, some of them get sent to Marshfield. It all depends. And it all depends on how busy the labs are with their testing capacity as to how long it takes. Sometimes it takes a day or two, sometimes it takes like a week. And I don't have any way of knowing that.
And I would also, this is Jackie again, Holly. I would also like to speak to the fact that you can have a test today and that test can go in and it can be negative. That doesn't mean that you're not exposed tomorrow. And
right.
That so it isn't a fail safe as is, the temperature checks and all the symptom checks. It's very difficult and complicated on all of that stance.
Correct. Especially if you've had a known exposure. So let me kind of break down to you. If you have had a known exposure with somebody who you know is positive for COVID-19, people's first reactions generally are to go out and get tested right away, whether they've had symptoms or not, because they just have to know. Well, you can do that, but that test isn't really going to tell you something unless you're perhaps an asymptomatic carrier, because it can take up to 14 days for the virus to multiply inside your body enough to show up on one of those tests. Those tests only show an acute infection. And so if the swab is done incorrectly, maybe they don't get it as far back as it needs to go. I don't know if any of you have been swabbed for COVID, but it goes really far back up your nose. If it doesn't get back that far, if it doesn't have an adequate sample, if your illness is new and your viral load isn't as high, you could have a negative when in fact you could show positive the very next day. Did I explain that okay?
Frighteningly well.
Yeah.
It's all, this is Debbie. It's all a little overwhelming. And, you know, I go back to thinking about Nicole's question, and I go back to when my adult children were in school, and, you know, we'd get a notice that there was chicken pox or something, you know, and, you know, to be on the lookout for chicken pox. And what I'm wrapping my head around, and I think what's hard for us as we talk tonight, is to understand that this is no chicken pox. This is, you know, we're not talking about a note from the school. This is bigger than that. This is more critical than that. It has to go through the county or the Red Cliff Tribal Health Center because of all the ways this can affect the whole community. And the school will have to get its information from Red Cliff Health personnel and from the county. In order, both those entities will have to be in touch with the school to give us the information that's needed to make a decision. The school can't monitor all of this and take sudden action. That this is a pandemic that's killing lots of people. And I think that's really hitting home in this conversation in a way that, you know, it just brings it close to home, is that, yeah, if I called the school and said my child was tested positive, the school's going to say, well, you know, keep them home, right? And be in touch with your doctor. The county or Red Cliff are going to be the one who are going to be out tracing it and contacting other people that have been in contact. The school doesn't have the capacity to do that. And I guess I'm just feeling like it's a lot to wrap your head around when we get this kind of detailed information. I'm also very, very thankful for the graphs. The graphs are very explicit and very detailed. And I think all the families are going to need to be educated in this. And I think, you know, with having those first couple of weeks of school to communicate with families on all of these things will be good. But it is kind of it's a little overwhelming tonight, just saying, to really get the whole parameter of this thing and how big it really is.
And then it is kind of a learning curve. You know, I've been doing this with this pandemic since March. You know, I've worked with Jeff and the rest of the teams at the school all summer, giving guidance and helping Jackie come up with plans and deciding what we're going to do. And so I feel very confident in our working relationship that all together, we're going to get it done. We'll get done what needs to be done.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Holly. This is Jackie. Thank you.
Has the plan been presented to the staff? Because we sound like we're 100%. I mean, you guys are making it sound like everything is figured out in there, and the staff have been given the plan, so they know the protocol when they have had a positive in the school. The staff know what they're supposed to do, or what are we doing, Jeff? What are we doing?
Proving it.
Yeah, so we have in-service coming up next week. We have 5 days of in-service.
Nope, lost him.
Turn on your other mic, Jeff.
Thank you for that, Mike. We have in-service starting next week. We have new staff coming in on Friday. We have 5 days of in-service with all of our other staff members. We will be going through this document and going through the overall planning that was done this summer. So staff will be in tune before kids arrive. And they'll be able to ask questions, et cetera. And Holly will be in those meetings. Sherry will be in those meetings. Most of our meetings with the in-service timeframe will be virtual. So there will be a lot of this going on with staff, and they'll have a ton of questions, I'm sure.
And I'll also mention that I attend the wellness committee meetings for the school. I have attended the all committee roundup meetings. I have attended all staff meetings, and I have answered a lot of questions from various staff. So I make myself available to whoever has a question.
Okay, but did we decide if staff has already seen this plan?
This is Jackie. Can I just say too, like, I think it's important that that we've been working on a plan, but I think we need to know from the board too, if the plan is acceptable and what parts and pieces are not acceptable or are acceptable from
That's
the
where
board,
I'm coming
please.
from, is I'm thinking that our goal tonight, this is a draft plan, and our goal tonight was to look at this plan, get input, get our questions answered, and then we make the decision about moving this plan forward, whether or not we think it's ready or what else it might need, and what's our chance to give input. And then it goes to the next step of working with the people who aren't in the critical team, with Beth and Holly and Sherry and Jeff and the other admin. And then it goes out to student or staff and gets ready for families. That's what I was assuming that this was tonight. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct, Deb.
All right.
With that said, I wanted to thank Holly for everything, for all of her work since day one. I want to thank Sherry and Redcliffe, Jackie, and all the other committee members on this document. Moving forward, it's a start. You know, there may be subtle changes here and there, but it's definitely a good start. And if Holly is okay, we'll transition into some other things right now. And Holly, are you going to stay around for a little while, or are you gotta head out?
Do you need me to? Because I do have about 4 things I have to take care of before I can go to sleep tonight.
No, I think if board's okay, we'll send her on her way. So we'll move on in the document if that's okay.
And I do want to say, just keep in mind that some of these things in this document are going to be subject to change as guidelines change. Jackie and I keep up to date with what's happening with the CDC and the WHO and the state recommendations and guidelines. We view the DPI documents, and I heard that there's going to be more recommendations coming from DPI soon. And so, you know, it'll be an ever-changing thing, I think, but we'll make sure that everybody is updated when guideline changes are made.
Okay, thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. So now what we'll do is I will introduce Beth Papp. Beth has been working with the committees for the last week, gathering information. There is a table of contents for the school board in the document. The table of contents goes from page 1 through 24. We did discuss pages 5 through 8 or 9 or 10. I mean, that was the flow charts and the what ifs. There's a lot of other information that we've had discussions on in the previous weeks. There's some information in there that's new. And I wanted the board to maybe take a peek at that during this time frame. And if there's an area in the table of contents that you wanted to maybe talk about, we can do that. We have people on board tonight for that. Beth, do you want to just give a brief introduction of the last week or so and what's been going on?
Sure. Well, as so many people have already shared, what I want to emphasize are 2 things. And one is that this draft is truly a team effort, that it it does take a lot of people to create a working document. The second being is that this, as others have said too, is it's fluid. There will be changes, and we have are presenting tonight a really good beginning. There certainly are some pieces that we need to continue to flesh out and consult with staff and really get a good feeling for some of the sections, but I think we have a good beginning, and having Holly and Sherry and Jackie on board right away to drill down a bit on the nitty gritty of the flow charts and really the health and safety piece, which is why we're here. The whole reason why we've created this document, we're in a pandemic, we're needing to navigate new territory and work with each other, sometimes in slightly different ways than what we're used to. So I think to the other piece is just communication, talking to one another. And what I've very much appreciated this past week in putting this together is the availability of folks. You know, Sherry and Holly have been working really, really hard, and Jackie as well. So that's very much appreciated. So as Jeff said, the board has access to, in electronic form anyway, the draft as it stands right now. And in looking at the table of contents, I'm old school, so I printed it out because it's just hard for me to always look at a screen. But we have quite a few sections, some of which you've already seen. So the curriculum and instruction piece that starts on page 11, that should look familiar to you because Rick Erickson and the committee have put that together. You saw that in July when the level 1, level 2, level 3 was rolled out and then expanded on. And I think, and I do know that Rick shared that portion of the document with you. I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that. Is it likely that that will change as we go forward? Sure, just because we don't know how the pandemic will play out in our communities, and we may need to make adjustments in instruction for sure. Not to put any of you board members on the spot, but are there specific sections that caught your attention that you would want to take a look at?
Can we look at page 10? This is Magdalene.
Page 10, sure.
Yeah. So my biggest concern on this, or my question on this page, is where it states student and staff groupings are as static as possible by having the same group of children stay with the same staff. And I think one hole that we have in our plan is how this would be accomplished, or if we are going to actually strive for this during level 2. When I look at the plans for level 2, it has students moving from class to class on their normal schedule. I haven't seen a plan yet for how elementary students are going to have specials. I put an idea out there that possibly specials could be offered on a rotation, so that like for instance, first graders would only be interacting with their classroom teacher and one specials teacher like during that week. So we're really containing it instead of sending elementary students to 5 different teachers. So that's something that I continue to have a concern with, and I'm grateful to see it in the document here, but I want to see some follow through on how that's actually playing out in the schedules during level 2 in particular.
Okay, thanks for that, Magdalene. I don't know, Shelley or Janine, do you want to speak specifically to the student staff groupings are as static as possible?
The only thing I can say, and maybe Rick can correct me, but I know we talked about specials coming into the classrooms So special teachers would come into the classrooms. We still haven't figured out, there was talk about virtual too with specials, but that hasn't been figured out yet as far as I know, and maybe Rick could tell you more about that.
Sure, I can
I
address.
guess
Go ahead, Magdalene.
well, another concern that I have within that is that some of the specials teachers are the only ones, I can't talk right now. Oh, thanks. Some of the specials teachers are the only ones that really move between elementary and high school. But it seems like we have 2 gym teachers, we have 2 PE teachers. Can one be designated high school and one be designated elementary? So in the case that we're getting more positive cases in the high school, for instance, that it's not that the contact tracing is really contained to the high school. It seems like that would be something that we could accommodate, but I don't see that in the current plans.
Sure, I can address that. I think, I don't know that I'm going to give you an answer that's going to make you happy, but this is something, these plans have been evolving over the course of the summer and on pretty limited timescales. We meet for like 2 hours a week, and there are a lot of unanswered questions. We've really focused on getting the main structure out and then getting some framework out for teachers so that we have a general idea of what things are going to look like. Those are questions that have not been fully answered yet. They've been topics of discussion, but we haven't brought forward any formal recommendations regarding those specific things. We have, like Janine said, we have talked about in the elementary bringing specials into the classroom so that those students are primarily in the classroom. We have talked about at the middle school, having the students stay in the room and having the teachers rotate to the classrooms. That hasn't been formalized. We haven't made those decisions yet or we haven't made recommendations about what we would recommend to the board as to what we would do. And I think all those things will happen. And I appreciate the suggestion about the, designating a Phi Ed teacher for one K-5, one 6-12. I just wrote that down. We certainly will bring that as one item of potential discussion. I think the hardest one's going to be the high school because how the high school runs. The students are not split into sections A and B. They're all on their own independent schedules. And so we've talked a little bit about that and how do we at the high school level maintain pods or groupings when they're not necessarily in the same classes. That's going to be the biggest challenge. I think we'll be able to work it out for elementary and middle school in a way where students are they're staying with a small group of kids. We know that that's important. We've heard that over and over, that for the purpose of contact tracing, if something develops, we want to be able to have a small isolated group that we're working with, and we get that. High school is going to be a challenge, and we've talked about it, but we're really still batting around ideas. So you haven't seen anything yet because we haven't brought anything to you yet, and we'll keep working on that.
I think one thing at the high school, at the very least, it can just be communicating that the risk in the high school was potentially higher risk than in the elementary and middle school because we're not able to do the pods. And then giving families options. This is why I want to push this conversation forward about more dual credit options, especially in the juniors and seniors, or those students who, would be ready to take dual credit classes. That's a virtual option that is available. And if more families are seeing like, okay, regular high school is going to feel risky, but here's a virtual option that gives our students college credits at the end too. But it does require some board level and admin level changes because the current early college credit, students who signed up for early college credit program, that application deadline was March 1st, but March 1st, you couldn't have known what the situation would be for the fall. And so if the district wanted to move forward and say, we'll pay for students to take college classes, we could, then that's opening up one more option for students. And there would be a way, I believe, to go it doesn't have to go through early college credit program. The district can just cover the whole cost, which we do already. I know in situations we've already done that on occasion.
I would just like to add to that, Magdalene. What that also does is it decreases the size of the rest of the population. So I think that's a really good idea.
It's super time sensitive. LCO college classes start in 2 weeks, but we have people register right up until the first day of classes. I don't know what the WITC academic calendar is, and if that could be an option too when their classes begin. But it's an idea.
Well, I would encourage us to explore that very quickly.
So I can bring that forward in the instruction committee meetings. But I would assume that's something that would require action on the board to be able to have us bring that forward and present that as an option to kids and families. Is that correct?
I think it would take board action. And I don't know if that's an action that we can take tonight or if that needs to be an agenda item on another board meeting in the near future. The action, there's a few actions that we would need, I believe. One is just saying the district will cover the cost, the full cost, that they don't have to have done the early college credit program application, that we will skip that for this, or allow for this year for them to join late. And then I think probably put some parameters at both LCO College and WITC are under $200 a credit. If you're trying to take online classes at a, UW Superior or Northland, now it's gonna be a lot more expensive. I don't know that the district's signing up for that. The other thing is, and I don't know why this decision was made in the past, but currently dual credit classes, students only earn a half credit per semester for their dual credit classes. And in my opinion, that really should be a full credit. The classes are much more intensive, and an equivalent college semester would be like 4 classes as full time. So then they get 4 high school credits in the semester, which would be a normal high school semester. But if you only gave them half credits, now they're only getting 2 credits and it's not equivalent. But time-wise, it really is equivalent to take 4 college classes in comparison to 7 or 8 high school classes. So those are really the 2 items I think that would need action soon to open the door for families to be pursuing that as an option.
I'm kind of curious what Beth and Rick think about that, or those 2 items.
I mean, I think we always want to open the door for opportunities for the students. I'd want to hear more from administration on their feeling about it. The credit thing is a little more complicated, and there are a variety of reasons. And I don't know that, that's not a pressing issue to me right now, but I can just give you a little bit of background on that. Part of that has to do that if we gave a full credit, we try to keep it consistent with our semesters. If we gave a full credit for a semester English class, for example, a student would be able to graduate from Bayfield by taking 2 years of English rather than 4 years of English, which is a requirement of the state. So we're trying to keep the credits on a high school credit scale versus a college credit scale. And it's complicated, but if we were to issue more than a half a credit, it would potentially allow somebody to leave Bayfield School with fewer than the state requirement of classes. So that I think is a more complicated discussion. And so not that it's not up for debate, it's just that that's probably, to me, not a pressing issue at this time. We have pretty serious emergency issues of accommodating this COVID situation right now. And I do want to say to the entire board, these discussions are awesome. I really appreciate all you guys are doing. I appreciate your comments, and I feel really good about the fact that I'm here in this district, because I think everybody's taking this very seriously and moving in a good direction. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Glenn, just to respond, I agree with what Rick said, and that is, this is a really important conversation to be having about giving our students different options and where and how they can learn. And I think that that's always really valuable. I feel confident that the instruction committee, is hearing this. Rick said he's going to bring it forward, that it certainly will be part of the conversation. And I think it's a really exciting alternative for our high schoolers to be able to take advantage of. We do have this document to get through. I'm taking notes as people are talking. So, dual credit is flagged, and I know with so many people on board now with it, that we'll get some clarification and better direction as we go forward.
And Beth, I would thank you for that. And I would just add, I don't know that the board expects that you are going to give us, or that we should wait for a final document. And so that if there are things that you think that we need to do, if your groups think we need to address certain things before you're ready to present a final document, then please do. If there are some recommendations that you think are important and urgent, time-wise, and you can agree on them, I'd say, feel free to get that to us before you get a full report to us.
Thank you. Will do. Any other comments or questions from the board? So Jeff, at this stage, if there aren't any other comments or questions regarding it, how do you want to proceed?
I think we should proceed with the recommendations tonight from various board members that we all wrote down on our notes, and then provide them a finished document for approval. And the sooner we can do that, we can move forward with the whole moving forward. And I guess I'll ask the board members, when we have that draft, we feel is confident in completion. Like Beth said earlier, it's a moving target. It's constantly fluid in some respect and not else. If the board would allow for a special meeting, or when we meet with the tribal council, either Wednesday or Thursday, if Beth is confident that we all can get things to a point where we feel real confident that maybe at that tribal council meeting we can have it as an agenda action item to approve it, so we can all move forward on the other stuff we talked about.
Yeah, and I think too, I just want to add, maybe reminded me of it as you were talking, just the importance of allowing the committees that have worked all summer on articulating all the different components that make our school district work. And I know that they were just given the same draft. At least I think, Jeff, you handed that or emailed that to the chairs of all the committees, this afternoon. So having an opportunity to take a look at that, make comment, make additions as well, so that we can then hand over to the board as complete, at least to date, as timely a document as we can.
And to Beth and everyone who's been working on this, this latest version is just incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll go in with that too. I was just going to say the same thing. The detail and the working parts of this clearly have been just well thought out by our amazing staff. And again, I also am just really appreciative. And for Beth to have you on board pulling these pieces together is really rewarding to see. So thank you, and thank you to everybody.
This is Ann. Sullivan. If I could speak for just a moment, what would be helpful to the instruction committee is if that piece could be authorized by the school board so that we can go forward. We feel like we're kind of in limbo. And I know it's the entire document is not completely done, but that would give us a good portion to go forward with, instead of waiting for everything to be done. I would appreciate that.
I have 2 comments on that section. So if we're looking at page 11, one comment is week 3 of school will move the district to level 2 unless we can't with health recommendations. And I'm wondering, and I know we might not have an answer right now, but this is something that I'd like to get from the instruction committee in order to be able to approve it. But at week 3, or when it's okayed, what will the plan be for families who choose all virtual? Are those families starting with EduSeer at the very start of week 1, or are they participating in the district-led 2 weeks of virtual learning and then moving into EduSeer at the start of week 3 potentially, or whenever we go back to in-person learning?
Okay, our intention with that was that for families who are choosing EduSeer, they would start with that immediately. They would choose that, they would begin with that, primarily because it's our understanding that EduSeer is a semester class. So for them to be able to complete the semester, they would want to start that at the beginning of the school year. So that would have to be communicated to families very clearly, that if they're choosing the third-party EduSeer option, that's an option that starts immediately week 1. So they would not be participating in our 2 weeks of fully virtual, or if we went beyond those 2 weeks, they would not be participating in that.
And then is EduSeer going to be the only all virtual option?
At this point, that's my understanding. What we recommended, we didn't even I don't believe that we recommended a company. We just recommended that there be a third-party virtual option, and then the research brought EduSeer forward. I think partially because a couple of the other options that looked like were full, and so we didn't even have the option of using them. And then the other thing was that there were other local districts using EduSeer, so it seemed logical to be using a company that other local districts are using. And then, like I said, they had the availability for us, so we could latch on to them. So as far as I know, no other companies that have availability have been looked at beyond EduSeer.
Okay, and then I don't know if Shelley's like presenting on the surveys during this portion of the meeting tonight, but related directly to that question, when I look at the survey results, and this was from before, and I'm guessing we have more response by now, and that those responses may change too. As Holly indicated, we're in orange. How does that change people's responses to their comfort level about sending their child to school? But I would really like a clear breakdown about how many students we would potentially be losing if EduSeer is the only virtual option, and is there a way to offer any other virtual option, a district-led option or not?
So I can jump in here now, Magdalene, with some of the results from the survey.
Thank you, Shelley.
Because a lot of the results from the survey and the planning over the last 2 weeks has kind of altered a little bit of that plan that we just looked at the document. The recommendations that I'm putting forth as an administrator, and this is based on being a part of several of the subcommittees and meeting with Jeff and Stephanie and Beth over the last few days. And that would be that at minimum, right now, we plan for all virtual teaching and learning for the first 4 weeks. At best, I would recommend it for the first full quarter. So we could devote that to the virtual learning for all students. Admin come back together and continuously over the first 4 weeks, and then we meet on October 1st with health officials from Bayfield County and the tribe to reevaluate that and continue the work if we should move into level 2 at that point or continue the level 1. The level 1 is virtual for everybody. So that would be the Bayfield school teachers teaching to those who chose the hybrid blended model. Some families that I spoke to did want to try the EduSeer just because they didn't want to be locked into a 9 o'clock Zoom, or they have multiple children and their technology wouldn't support meetings throughout the day, and they'd rather have a little bit more of a family plan of having an EduSeer program for them to work with. So I'll just go through. I kind of analyzed the survey. We still have more surveys coming in. We had 197 when I pulled this together this afternoon, responses for students, and 89 were from elementary, 50 high school, 37 middle school, 10 on La Pointe, 8 from Red Cliff ECC, and 3 from the Family Forum because we included the 4K. On average, that was 14 respondents per grade level. So that pie graph.
Shelley?
Yeah.
I do apologize for interrupting you, but Linda, can you not display the names on the screen, please? Can you go down the slide and not display the names on the screen?
Yeah, if you go further down, there's the pie graphs.
Thank you.
And so I'm on the second pie graph, and you'll see a lot of color there because it's what's your child's grade level. So it's pretty even across the board from 11 up to 17 kids per class. So the average was 14 per grade level. Out of those that responded there, 60% or 60 respondents, which is 31%, wanted online or virtual learning only. But that was if Bayfield staff was involved. And some of it was if it was completely EduSeer online without a time schedule each day. 47 people, which was 24%, wanted the 2-day blended, and 23% wanted their kiddos back in school face-to-face as much as possible. The other 12%, and you can't see all of the comments there, but you see all those different little color lines, were anywhere from they want to wait it out before they answered it to see what the numbers are. They're going to go to strictly homeschooling, and then a lot of unsure, like maybe I'll send them, maybe I want blended, I don't know. And I think that's just the anxiety we have with numbers going up. To add on top of that, I did have a parent contact me and say, can I redo this for my 3 kids? I answered it on July 27th, and the numbers weren't that bad. But right now, the answers I gave you is not what we want right now, which it just shows how fluid this whole pandemic is, and our planning and all the documents we're creating, everything changes based on numbers. And, that mom, I said, well, let's just stick with what we have, because I'm sure we'll have more surveys as things change. But, she was somebody who said she wanted her kids back as much as possible because she and her husband worked and they needed to be there. Now she wants them to be virtual as much as possible.
I would really appreciate another survey going out so that families like her, that we stay up to date.
Right. And it's really easy with these Google Forms to create another survey. And all of this data right here that we're looking at it's created instantly. Every time I get a new answer, the pie graphs will change. So it's a super easy way to survey people. The only problem is some families don't access our Facebook page or our social media. So for the last week, Lucy and Keely and I have been reaching out through emails, phone calls, Messenger, sending them the link and saying, if you don't have access, I can ask you the questions and fill in the information for you. That's a little bit, I don't think it's honest answers, because of course, if you're trying to express your opinion over the phone for someone to fill it in, they're not out. I don't think you're always as completely honest. So I only did that for 2 parents, but they had no way of answering this online survey. The next pie chart was about the third-party EduSeer, and it's pretty divided, with 103 people saying no. They did not want anything online. You can read several things into that. They just don't want virtual at all, or they don't want virtual unless it includes their staff. And 94 people said yes with more information. And as we share information, it goes both ways. Some people are like, yep, that's what we need. And some people are like, no, I don't want the third party without Bayfield staff. The technology issues for this.
Can I make a comment quick on that last one, on the Eduseer one?
Yep.
I think if we did do a second survey, we could really break out that question better and just say, if your preference is virtual, would you prefer student or district-led or Eduseer, and really kind of spell it out more what each one would entail.
Right, right. And you know, when we did have our little presentation from the Eduseer rep, we were exploring 3, I think maybe 4 different options. And so we were just getting the basics. So we do have another meeting tomorrow where we can ask more questions and get more answers of what it will look like for our special ed students, what it will look like for our kids who struggle with online learning, but that's what they want. So we'll have a little bit more detailed answers to throw in a survey to say, okay, you want virtual, here's what Eduseer can offer you. And the rep that we listened to, honestly, when we asked him, you know, what could you do for students with IEPs? He was a sales rep. He wasn't an educator. So he really didn't have good concrete answers. I believe one of his answers was, well, we offer really good time slots and seating charts. And I was like, I'm not even a special ed director. And I thought that was just a canned answer because he didn't know how to answer us. Going down to the next one, technology issues. We're kind of small for our population, which is a good thing, but not good for those 7% who didn't have a dedicated internet at their house. And those who did have internet, 22% didn't have enough internet or broadband to support high quality instruction for either where they live or because they had multiple children needing access to the internet at the same time. And
Shelley, this is Glenn.
Yep.
What are we doing to address that issue?
You know, we haven't met as a technology subcommittee in, I want to say, over a week and a half. But I do know that we were looking at hotspots, but with talking to Randy and with the audit, we can't just purchase hotspots to give to people, and they may or may not work because of the rural areas. I know some districts had hard copies, but then you're looking at the equitable again. If you're, you know, some kids are getting videos and those who don't have internet don't. I mean, that's a huge equity issue for our students. I looked into it, and some of the districts that had this issue, since they weren't busing and using school vehicles, they would park a school vehicle with a hotspot in it in neighborhoods so families could have that hotspot.
That's clever.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if that's something, I don't even know if a hotspot would work, say, on the island, because right now I'm working with a family that I know there that's struggling with internet issues, and I don't know. That's something that we'd have to discuss with Chris, and then providers. Does AT&T or does Verizon, or what works best where, and how can we fix that for families?
But we have the island is blessed with 1 gig fiber optic service. We have better service than Minneapolis.
Oh.
So the capacity is there.
And I just shared some information with Jared Blanche at the JOM, because I know Bed River JOM is funding internet for the next 10 months for families who have Bed River tribal members in school needing access to that internet there. That's how they've chosen to use some of their COVID and JOM money. So that's something that we're still working on, but it is a small population. But you know, even if it's just 1 kid, it's huge because it's that equity issue, which we have always looked at across the committees of making sure we're offering good quality education to everybody.
People need to have equal access.
Right, right.
And this is Chris. I've also been looking into this. There's some statewide initiatives that are looking at getting people connected to low-cost internet programs. And from my conversation with our E-rate provider, it seems that we may be able to provide service for families, even in these times, whether it be hotspots or even getting a dedicated charter internet line to their house. what we need is information on who all these families are. We need addresses so that we can follow up with the providers and see if we can get them service. And there are some areas in northern Wisconsin, in our area, where there's nothing other than satellite, and satellite's a poor alternative. So
Well, whatever we can do, I think we want to do.
Hey guys, this is Jackie. I'm just curious about staff in that as well. So if staff is expected to be virtual, is that an option for staff as well?
For the internet? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, to make sure that there is connectivity, or is staff then expected to maybe report to the school building or something if they don't have connectivity from their home?
You know, I have been taking that like on each case differently. And I do know one staff member shared with others, he contacted Charter and said, I've been working from home. Can I get a discount? And they did offer a discount for educators who needed their internet access. Of course, that's not going to work for everybody. But I also know of several staff members who do come in because it's easier to work in their classroom. And if we follow those posted safety protocols of wearing your mask, sanitizing your hands when you come in, and just staying in your room to work, I think that's probably the safest option. I know I've utilized it. I have great Wi-Fi at home, but with
Just
my
thinking
family
to
and
address that, because I know that, I don't have the greatest internet connection myself. And so I can certainly go over to Bayfield, but just a thought out there for staff too, that don't have that great connectivity.
yeah, and maybe that's when we look into another survey to staff members when we come to decide if they can work from home or come work in the building if hotspots are needed. The last question on the survey that I have here to present was the question from the wellness committee about thermometers, and that's a very small percentage with 8.6 saying they did not have access to thermometers in their home, which I think is a good sign that most of our families are equipped for this and can do self-checks at home. I don't have the staff survey results to share here, but we had 10 of our 44 staff members who responded said yes, that they are unable to come to work because of either childcare, transportation, or one of the health issues that were presented. And it could have been any health issue or persons over age 65. And that came from the Wisconsin State School Board Association question, grouping them together so we couldn't pinpoint what it is, just to keep things confidential and not prying because of confidentiality laws. We can't say what is it that makes you not be able to come. So and that's just 44 of our staff that answered that. So if you just took on average of that, it's going to be about a quarter of our staff members who have something that may prevent them from coming in the building. And even though a lot of staff members checked no, that none of those reasons affected them, a lot of the comments were things that anxiety, anxious, the unknown, and bringing it home to somebody else was a concern. And so with all of those survey results from the family surveys and the staff surveys, that's where my recommendation of working in level 1 for minimum the first 4 weeks, possibly up to the first quarter, and reevaluating it October 1st.
What were the staff results of the other questions in terms of comfort, teaching virtually, teaching in person? Were there any staff that really are like wanting to, would prefer to teach in person?
A lot of staff there was high that they felt comfortable teaching virtually, and then it was low, they felt comfortable using Canvas because we're still struggling to get trainers in the house to come and work with our staff. So I think the spring really set the teachers up for, if I got to do this, we got to do this, because they were forced into it. And I think with a little training, they all felt they could do it, but they're not prepared to use Canvas at this point.
What about in person? Was there a percentage of teachers that indicated that they would prefer or feel comfortable teaching in person, even if it's the minority percentage?
You know, I didn't like look at the yes, no answers compared to what the comments were. I just looked at 10 out of 44 checked yes, that might be an issue. And then I just glanced through the comments. I read through them. I didn't compare them who said yes or no, but a lot of them, even the people who answered yes, like I can come to work, I don't want to lose my job, but I have this fear. I may bring it home and give it to my wife, or I may bring it home to my elderly mother who lives with me. So a lot of fear of coming in doing face-to-face.
Thanks, Shelley, for all your work on this. I really appreciate it. And those who have helped you with it too. It doesn't make sense for us to make a plan without input from both all of the families and all of the staff.
Great, thank you.
If we go back to the document, the COVID-19 district draft response plan, and Annie's request to have us approve the instruction section. The only other question that I had also on page 11 was each classroom teacher will survey families in the first week to find out their preferred method of communication, email, phone, other. And I just have had this question of whether an in-person outside of school it is an option if teachers and families are both comfortable with this. Do we know, is it okay for teachers to be meeting with families in person outside in a safe way during the virtual stage, especially if we're thinking we're going to do virtual for the whole first quarter potentially? Are there any in-person possibilities? Again, there doesn't need to be an answer. That's just something I want explored by the committee before I'm comfortable approving the document.
Rick, was that brought up in the instruction at all about teachers offsite during virtual? Working with.
Yeah, we talked about it. It wasn't a major item of discussion, and primarily it wasn't because last spring when we were in the situation we were in, there were a couple of questions and requests about potentially working with either individual students or small groups of students, and that did come forward to the board, and what we were told, and this is reasonable, I believe. What we were told was because the district had made the decision to close school and to be virtual, that we were going to be consistent with that. And so we were told that working with individual students or small groups of students would counteract the decision to go virtual. And so we were told that we couldn't do that last spring. So yes, it has come up a couple of times in the instruction committee, but like I said, we've really been focused on getting the major structures in there. So it's been side discussions, and we really haven't brought anything forward. I'm not saying that people aren't in favor of doing something like that, but it really hasn't been an item of discussion or anything that's been brought forward. So that, to me, that's a board decision about whether, if we're in a fully virtual mode, then I think we would need approval from the board to be able to do anything that's exempt from that fully virtual mode.
This is Anne again. speaking, and I have had some conversation with, for instance, our reading specialist, that they felt real strong that they would like to do just exactly what Magdalene was talking about. And so we didn't discuss it and put it in the plan because, like Rick said, that's a board decision. So that's why it's not in there as a recommendation. But I do know that some staff who feel that they could do their job better and do better justice to the kids by having some sort of connection.
Thanks, Rick and Annie. I appreciate your input on both of that. Nicole, is that something that we could take action on tonight or have some board discussion on at least?
I feel like we probably need a lot of information before we could make a decision like that, like on equitability and the legal aspects behind that, the staff protection and all the procedural things that need to be laid out. Like, I'm a procedure person, so I want to see it all laid out, like for everything. If we're going to make a change like that, that would be big.
So then does it go to Jeff and Beth to come up with something and present it back to us? But how do we move forward instead of just keeping the door?
If the board wants to see that decision or wants to see even just the idea of what it would look like, we can recommend and ask for that. But I would like to see the feasibility rather quickly so that we're not wasting a lot of people's time when they're so short time to get a lot of stuff done.
It's an area where I just think it could make a real difference, like Annie said. And if there's staff that's saying they would like to have that option, like the reading specialist, giving that one-on-one reading attention. And I feel like what we know about how COVID is spread now is evolved from what we understood in the spring, which was not a lot. And that it is more safe to be outside with a mask in a one-on-one situation. And that for us to just close the door on something like that, which could be huge for those few children that like she could be serving. I don't know. I think it's important to keep the door open on the idea.
Well, I agree. Oh, is that Debbie?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say that I agree that that is something that we want to keep as a possibility, but in the essence of time, interest of time here, I'm thinking that, is that something that we could build in when we move from completely virtual to, something else, and more as a possibility, going back to Rick's description earlier of when the school's in all virtual, then, that's because numbers are higher and risk is higher. So when numbers are lower and risk is lower, it would make sense to leave the door open for some of that. But in terms of making a full policy about it, as Nicole has said, I'm afraid that we need to move pretty fast so that the school, if we can do something tonight so the instruction committee can keep moving forward, and they've done a phenomenal job already on the details that they've put into this, and that Jeff and Beth can move forward, with whoever else is working with them on getting this finalized so we have a final document, and leave, if we want to put something in there that said online or face-to-face meetings with students and special or teachers or whatever, maybe an option, to be discussed with, the COVID coordinator and administration, given the circumstances. I mean, that would be fine with me, to leave it as an open door there because these folks are doing, between what our medical people are doing and our instructional people, I just have really high confidence in all of these committees and our staff that have been working so hard. They are pulling in every resource they can to make the best decision. So I'd like to do something like that. I don't want to wait. I don't want to slow this process down. And I think it's okay to leave that open as a future discussion item on a case-by-case basis.
I agree with Debbie, and I think it's important to leave the option there, and it could almost be like a COVID IEP. So if a student can't quite fit the mold for what we have in place, otherwise, then maybe if it's a special ed student, maybe then they can just create an IEP for learning for that student, and this would just leave the door open for them to somehow meet in person if that student needed it, and if the teacher was comfortable.
Yep.
This is Stephanie Lewis, your special ed director. Just so you're aware, from a special education perspective, the students with IEPs will have what they're calling a contingency plan, where there will be an outline of their programs within their program summary of the IEP under the different phases of what the school's in. So if the school is virtual, there will be an outlined plan within their IEP as to how they will receive services. If it's a hybrid, if they're face-to-face, each level will have a plan depending on what phase they're in.
I'm thinking too, while I'm listening to everybody, and I mean, I hate to say it, but maybe this is where we have, a smaller group of people work on this particular aspect of instruction. And so it's not burdening the entire instruction committee, in slowing down the really good progress that's been made, but have me, one or two other people, maybe Jeff can work on the legal side of it, just say, because Nicole raised some really good questions. I don't think we want to just push it to the side or to the back burner, because I think it's an element of teaching and learning that in any instance is really valuable, and it might really spark up some teacher or students availabilities and interests, like Annie gave that example, which I think is a perfect one. So my suggestion would be to, and I wrote it down just to, I'll talk with Rick, I'll talk to Jeff, see if we can have a small committee to continue to bring it forward.
So Beth, is it your recommendation that we adopt this instructional portion of the plan, or?
Yes.
Okay. And as far as the question about the in-person, side things, I would just say, like I think the board's attitude on this whole pandemic has been to try to do the best for the kids and to have as much flexibility as possible. So I don't think that Nicole's issues, I think, are valid and should be dealt with. But I think that if I can speak it just for myself, I'm very flexible about what to allow the staff to be able to do.
With all the suggestions here tonight, it sounds like we gave our administration some walking papers. So I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and approve what was put in front of us tonight, and have them come back with a better version of it at our next meeting.
I'll second that.
Is there more discussion? Because I heard multiple other wants and needs, so. And our staff have not seen that, or they have seen that portion of instruction? They've seen the whole thing, Beth?
The instruction, I believe that was sent out. Rick, correct me if I'm wrong. And I know that Jeff was emailing out the draft plan to the committee heads today. So not all staff are tuning in and checking school email. So I can't say that everybody's seen it, no.
So is the motion just to accept the instruction portion, so we should probably list the specific pages.
And I would say with Magdalene's suggestions regarding looking into the dual credit issue and you know, our interest in doing that, if Larry is agreeable.
Yeah, I don't care. You know, my motion would be to accept the whole draft here tonight, and that there's going to be additions to it, and it's going to be coming back to us to be finalized. So yeah, what the heck?
Well, I'll second the whole thing, Larry,
Okay.
with Magdalene's suggestions.
Sounds good.
I mean, I'm only one vote, but I know where I'm at, and I feel like there's still too many holes. Like, it's still not. The instruction stuff is really well laid out, but there's still a lot of holes and a lot of questions that need to be answered before I feel good about taking action, because the last time we took action, it was taken so literal that it just kind of blew up all over the place. And now I feel like we're trying to clean up all this stuff and help give direction when this is the first time we've seen this plan.
Well, I have very great confidence in Beth. And I'm just amazed at what she has accomplished in a week, or I don't know, like maybe a week. And I think that this plan, yes, it is not perfect. But I don't think we want the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
I read through the plan very completely earlier today and was, you know, impressed with what I saw there as a beginning. What I've heard Jeff say and Rick and a few others is that this is a framework, and that by moving it forward, and saying we agree with what we see so far and know that you need that in order to continue moving it forward. And that not only do they need some approval or some consensus to move it to the next stage and continuing with all the details like Rick and Ann and Jeff and Beth have all said, but then, you know, and that will continue to come back to us. And in addition, once we approve a final document for everybody to use, it's still going to be fluid because we're getting all this input from county and state and federal, and you know, all of the COVID thing is a moving thing. So I am not afraid to sign on to moving this forward to the next level of development, and understanding that it will come back to us with more detail. That's where I am.
I'm with Debbie on that. I feel like we're approving a draft that with recommendations, and that I trust that we're being heard, and that there will be more time and work put into this, and that the holes that we've pointed out tonight will be filled in, and that we will have another opportunity to approve the final draft and make further recommendations as need be. Within that, I guess I would say I also read the document very closely. And one more thing, just because I felt like I was talking a lot and it's getting late, but the other area that I did have some concern was with the transportation. So that was page 22. Because it just seems like if we have a quarter of the students coming to school, when they're coming like half the students are still doing virtual, half of the students who are going to be in person are only coming every other day, that's a quarter of the student body with the same amount of buses. I don't see why we can't space them out more and put a seat in between kids and even run a second trip through new housing if we have to do that in order to really give that spacing. Anyways, it seems like that might be a down the road issue. Like maybe busing isn't our focus right now. Our focus is more on virtual for this first month at least. But at the point that we do get to busing, I don't know that the plan that's laid out here is really refined to the point that I would accept it yet. I think there can be spacing on the bus and there can be assigned seats.
We do have a limit with how many bus drivers we have, so that's always our limit.
Right, but it's the same amount of bus drivers as a normal school year and a quarter of the students on every day that need to be bused into the district.
Well, I think the comments are well taken, Magdalene, and I would just say, I think have been heard and yeah. And it's likely not to be an issue for the next 4 weeks anyhow.
Right.
So.
Right.
So Beth has good notes taken down on all the board recommendations because have a motion to approve the draft plan with all of the recommendations from the board. Motion by Larry and a second by Glenn. Cindy, any more discussion?
Nicole, I have one. I'm sorry. This is Jeff. I have to bring this up. Last we met with the health professionals, Sherry Burrow, and we met with Holly Weber, and Shelley talked about it multiple times in her report. The idea that we would go from a 2-week virtual to a 4. That was a question tonight. And I needed to get that out there for the board members. If, upon approving this draft, if the board would consider going from 2 to 4 weeks virtual. That was a recommendation from the health professionals.
I would say yes.
I would say yes.
I would agree too.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, I know at our last meeting, we talked about also starting on the 8th. Did we ever make any motions or anything on that? Starting the 8th, going the full month till the end of the month, virtual.
No, we did not.
We did not make any motions on that. Okay.
So at this point, the start date is still the same. And a later proposal, 4 weeks virtual, is being proposed because
the health professionals have recommended.
Well, let me ask Beth and Jeff. Would you recommend that we defer the start date till the 8th, and then instead of doing the first 4 weeks of virtual, we'll do 3 weeks of virtual and kind of reevaluate things for the end of September?
Well, isn't the 8th the Tuesday after Labor Day? Was that when we usually start? Or am I off on my dates?
the week before we were scheduled to start.
September 1.
Oh, we were scheduled September 1. I see.
And I kind of like the idea of letting other people go first.
My response to the question would be keep the current start date, because the parents have been planning that with, with childcare and everything else, and their whatever situations they're in, but just tack on the extra 2 weeks based on the recommendations from the health people.
Yeah, I agree.
Larry, will you amend your motion for that?
No.
No, you don't like the 4 weeks.
No, I sitting at home today, I was looking at the very first draft that we had, and they were talking starting with 2 weeks virtual. Now we're up to 4 weeks, and 4 weeks we'll be sitting here answering the same questions and bringing up other things that didn't work out. So no, I'm willing to start the way we had it written in the first place.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to ask. Well, I'll call the question then.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Esme?
Aye, yeah.
And so that's just, we're doing just the 2 weeks,
Well,
right?
Larry's motion.
Was the 2 weeks.
Larry's motion was to approve moving this draft of this plan forward, moving the whole entire draft forward, and that's what you seconded. Then Jeff asked us about, that's a separate, we can look at that as something separate.
Yeah, but right now it's 2 weeks it's in there.
That is true, Deb, because that was in the first draft, the 2 weeks. So that's not part of this motion.
This draft is a work in progress too, so we can always amend that later as we go.
But currently, the thinking in that draft is the 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I brought the draft with me if you wanna look at it.
No, I just want to clarify that right now we've given authority to have the first 2 weeks be virtual.
Right, but what
Right.
we're hearing is that the health people are have made a recommendation to the school, that's Red Cliff Community Health Center and the Bayfield Health Department are giving our school the recommendation to do the first 4 weeks virtual. So that doesn't, that's where we're all going to be moving on this fluid plane. We're not going to be able to say, well, this is the way it's going to be right now. And then, we just heard that the health department just confirmed 5 more positive cases. Now, we don't know where those are, but we have to be able to move with what the health department recommends.
I just want to have clarity that what we're thinking so far is that we're going to start September 1st and the first 2 weeks are going to be virtual, and then we'll see.
I'll make a motion to have the first 4 weeks virtual and see what happens. If anybody wants to second that.
And we
I'll
just deal with the one that the motion that I made and it passed is the way I heard the count.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
that
passed. So
I
this
think
would be an
that passed.
additional motion, Larry.
Yeah, I think your motion passed, Larry.
I'm not opposed to going for that 4 weeks, but what's the rationale behind it? I haven't heard nothing yet. I was sitting home today thinking, of the first 4 weeks of virtual, we're going to be into the flu season. I thought that maybe a couple weeks with the kids, we'd probably get a feel for what these kids are and what they're doing and how they're feeling. So when the flu season hits, we'll have a better idea. That's what it is, flu rather than COVID.
Jeff, what did the Red Cliff Health Department and the Bayfield Health Department tell you about that recommendation?
I think it's the spike in the county. I think it's the increased volume that they're dealing with, not only COVID related, but also the tracking, and there's, individuals that are quarantined. I just think the volume in Bayfield, Washburn, in this particular area right now, and there's a feeling that if we had the extra time in September, once things settle down in the region, those extra days would help eliminate any possible effects of incoming COVID. So that was part of the rationale.
So I haven't put that in writing, and we'll look at it.
Can you bring it with our draft?
Yeah,
Next draft?
we'll present something if need be. It could be reduced by then. So this is fluid. So we'll bring something forward if it spikes, and we'll keep people informed. So.
I'm confused. Are we making a motion or not?
No second, so I haven't heard a second for Magdalene's motion.
Megan did make a motion to approve the first 4 weeks virtual. Are we motioning? We're moving on?
Not at this time for me.
Was there a second to the motion?
I don't know.
There was not yet, no.
No, we wanted to bring the documentation that Larry wants to see, so we're all on board, and we can make a decision within a week. you
So
know,
the
when.
motion failed for lack of a second.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, guys, we're moving on.
So Jeff, make sure that when you speak to Bayfield County that they kind of like put it in writing that their recommendation is, so we have the facts and backing of it, please.
You bet. Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda to the bus contract.
The finance committee did look at that and we recommended the contract as presented. If I'm correct on that, Larry?
Yes.
I have a question, and maybe Randy knows, because I know that we paid Viking Motor all through the spring when we did not have school. Did their staff continue to be fully paid?
Yes, we had a contract with them that they would continue to pay their staff. Also part of our, I also included from DPI, paying contractors the greatest extent possible. We do have to submit a waiver that we're going to be doing that if we accept any COVID or CARES Act funding. So yes, they did sign a contract with us that they were continuing to pay their staff.
Randy?
Paid them their normal flat? No specials, no anything, just their normal flat. And they paid their staff across the board.
Correct, that's right.
Randy, would our auditors have the ability to confirm that with them?
Yeah.
Beck did do that.
I don't know if they would because they're a private entity, but we have some staff members that work.
Well, can't we make our payments to them contingent on getting verification from them? Did I lose you? Hello?
Can't hear
I think it's my connection, but other people are dropping out.
Okay. I can
Glenn,
hear
can you restate the question?
My question is, can we not, as a condition, because this is, I mean, we're giving Viking Motors, you know, and any of our other contractors, but they're a big one, you know, a nice benefit. And it's because we're getting a nice benefit, but don't we have the authority to verify that they are doing what they say they are doing?
I'm sure Viking Motors would be more than happy to meet whatever requirements we are asking of them because they're buying a new bus based on this contract. So I'm sure they would be willing to do whatever we wanted.
Could you, Randy, just ask our auditors just to send them a confirmation?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Glenn, or Jeff, when you talked with the Viking Motors still, are they ready and prepared that they might have to do extra trips?
Yeah, two things. So that question was brought up earlier, I think, from Magdalene. Right now, the Transportation Committee has determined that because there's a split in students, A and B rotation, and there's also virtual, that they only need one bus per trip. They determined that based on the numbers, and Mike Gustafson from Viking Motors is in on those meetings, and he's too determined that we won't need multiple trips per route. Also, with the bus drivers, when we are full virtual or when we're virtual blended, there was a discussion about having the drivers transport meals on the buses to the homes. So they may be used in a different capacity. That was brought up too, because we don't have the staffing to bring out all the meals on a daily basis. We had pickup sites this summer, but come fall, we're looking to deliver the meals to the homes.
And we did put that in our contract too, that they would be delivering meals or whatever we needed them to do.
Great. Well, I move that we accept the contract with Viking Motors.
Second that.
We have a motion by Glenn and a second by Esme. Is there any further discussion? Although, or can we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Nicole Boyd,
Yes.
Cindy Garrity,
Yeah.
Larry Derrigan,
Yes.
Magdalene Dale,
Yes.
Esme Martinson,
Yes.
Glenn Carlson,
Yes.
Debbie Knopf.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to addendum to policy 6320, COVID-related purchases.
And Nicole, I'd like to speak to this. This was actually something that came up in the Finance Committee meeting. And it came up in connection with the, actually the idea of the purchase of this basically fumigator. And that, of course, everyone wants one of these now. And, you know, the sooner we can buy these kinds of things, the better. And so the Finance Committee was going to recommend that with the concurrence of the superintendent and the finance manager, that expenditures related to COVID be allowed with 24 hours notice to the board. Subsequently, I learned that actually the Neola policy gives the district administrator way more latitude than that, and is much more permissive than what the prior school board policy had been. So I would just propose that we table this discussion until we have a better understanding of what the prior policy had been, and maybe make some changes to the Neola policy, or to maybe not amend the Neola policy, but adopt a separate policy that would provide that emergency purchases by the district administrator could be approved with perhaps the consent of the board president, the written consent of the board president, or something like that. But you know, I think that's a policy committee decision, and you know, they're the Neola experts. So I would just propose that we table this and refer it to the policy committee.
Glenn, would this be with COVID money they're looking to do this?
Cindy, I think it was with anything, not just the COVID, but although, you know, what's COVID related. So there might be things, and actually in the policy, in the Neola policy, it just says that in the event of an emergency, the district administrator can spend essentially whatever they want without board approval. And they only have to notify the board at the next board meeting.
Okay. There's no dollar cap where he would have to get board action?
No.
Okay.
So I think it's something that we need the, you know, I think the Neola policy may be a little broad, and maybe it needs to be tightened a bit, but I don't have in front of me and don't have access anymore to the old policies. But I think it might be worth taking a look at what the old policy was.
Okay.
So my motion is to table this and refer it to the policy committee for their consideration at their next meeting.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Glenn to table the item, a second by Cindy. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on. We have consider purchase of Halo Fogger system.
I'll make a motion that we approve the purchase. And I will note that this is also something that I believe Red Cliff has also purchased, and it seems pretty amazing. So.
Second.
We have a.
Oops, sorry. I just have a quick question about it. How often is it used? Would it be at the end of every day, or is it this something that's just used at the end of every week, or is it in between group A and group B?
I see Terry on the line.
And it's okay if you don't have answers now. I just want to make sure that those questions are noted, because I do want to know once we have the system. I am in favor of getting it, but I want to know how often it's used, and if there is, there was something mentioned about like maybe there's a residue, and I know like when we spray at the farm too, you know, there's like a re-entry period, so that a time that we have the fields closed before we let people back in the fields again. And I just want to know if that, I want to know more about the chemicals that are being put out there. And I didn't find that information on the brochure.
Yeah, Magdalene, this is Terry. Right now, I don't believe we've come to a solid determination as to how often. When we went into the demo in Red Cliff, he stated he wouldn't suggest no more than like once every week or so, or if we have an outbreak. As far as I understand, it's a hydrogen peroxide solution. He did the demonstration, and in the 10 minutes, it left nothing on the seats in the bus or the windows, or no sort of moisture or anything. He says that there's no residue that's left that needs to be wiped. It's safe to go in after half hour to an hour.
Okay, thanks for that. I guess I am curious then why you wouldn't just do it at the end of every day.
Because the solution is $100 a gallon.
That's going to be the biggest downfall, is the cost.
Okay.
The machine itself, I believe it takes 2 gallons, and I can't remember what he had stated 2 gallons runs. I think it's 12 rooms it'll do up to. So 12 rooms in our building, you would end up using quite a bit of solution just to do it every day.
How much would that be, Terry? Every day?
And maybe you don't have the math on that right now, but that would be something that I'd like to see a breakout of the costs.
Yeah, right now I was just trying to do some quick math off the top of my head. I'm going to guess that overall we're going to have to use 8 gallons at a time.
So $800 a day.
You're going to be looking at about $850 per day.
So around $4,000 a week.
Yep.
If it
No,
was
I
used.
think we can afford that.
There's certain
right.
areas where it should be identified that schedule should be broken down, like the buses, they should be done every day.
Yeah.
There's an enclosed space, but some of the classrooms and rooms in the school, Magdalene, won't be eligible for the fogger to be used. You have to have certain type of ventilation and enclosure, and they do this like air test first in the rooms. So not every room will be eligible, but it would be good to see that schedule, like what rooms in the school are eligible and other spaces, because the school buses definitely can be fogged.
And at the minimum, you know, doing it twice a week, so in between group A and group B, I think would be good. And maybe it doesn't need to be every day, but at least in between the groups.
On Wednesdays and Fridays or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in between group A and B, wouldn't you only be using one room for 2 days? And then the other room would be in use the other 2 days, so it would make sense, wouldn't it?
Unless they break
No,
them down.
you break the class in half, I thought.
Yeah. They may
Oh,
be-
I thought the plan was 6A, 6B type of deal. So I'm still uncertain about how the A/B grouping is going to work.
I don't think it's totally clarified yet.
It's all to be.
I can answer that. Can I answer that?
I
Yes.
forgot who made the motion.
No, we would still be using all the rooms. The point would be to reduce the number of kids in each room. So yes, 6A may only be in the building, but they would be split between those rooms. So all of the rooms would be occupied. Same with the elementary. Each classroom would have half of their kids each day.
Understood. So that would be where doing it so often would be kind of hard due to the fact of only being 2 machines. It would take at least 10 minutes per room to sanitize, and then you can't go in the room to pull your hoses and nozzles out for another half hour to an hour.
Do we
So
need
unless if we purchased
We can
more
buy
hoses.
Yeah, buy more hoses.
Yeah, or another machine or something.
It literally takes minutes to do an entire room.
Yeah,
And
I
then
believe
you
it's 10
disconnect your
minutes.
hose, you leave your hose there and then you move the machine. It's
Okay.
the hoses that we would need more. The machine itself, you don't need multiple.
Let's get the hoses.
Did we vote on this?
I can't remember who made the motion. I didn't write it down, but I know someone made a motion. Glenn and then Larry.
I did, and Larry seconded.
Okay.
We need a roll call, I suppose.
Yes, we do. Larry Derrigan,
Yes.
Cindy Garrity,
Yes.
Nicole Boyd,
Yes.
Glenn Carlson,
Yes.
Esme Martinson,
Yes.
Debbie Knopf,
Yes.
Magdalene Dale.
Yes.
Moving on. Let's see. We have item 8 on our agenda, adjourn to executive session in accordance with Wisconsin statute 19.85. We have 2 items. Consider PBIS coach resignation and superintendent evaluation.
I move we move into executive session to discuss those 2 items.
Second.
We have a motion by Glenn and a second by Cindy. Could we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Glenn Carlson,
Aye. And do we have a link yet?
Yes, it's on your email. Should have received an email this afternoon.
Thank you.
I didn't get one.
Esme, is that you or Magdalene?
Magdalene.
I'm gonna check really quick though and make sure.
Okay.
I didn't see one.
I didn't get one.
That's it, Linda, finish the roll call.
Didn't even get one.
Okay, then I will send it out to everybody right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Larry Derrigan,
Yes.
Magdalene Dale,
Yes.
Debbie Knopf,
Yes.
Will
Nicole,
that change by itself?
Yes.
Esme Martinson,
Yes.
Cindy Garrity.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. See you in executive.